everyone, I'm Rubina.
And I'm Layla.
Welcome back to our channel, Nutrition Unpacked,
where we try diet so you don't have to.
We're going on the ultimate mission, maybe the most delicious mission.
This is the one I'm most excited for out of the past little diets that we've tried.
We're gonna finally find out what is up with the standard American diet.
You know, we're Canadian. What Americans eat is kind of like a little bit of like a meme, like a joke. Like I feel like in TV shows, in whatever, it's kind of like, oh, the American diet, haha.
But I feel like, are we not the same?
We're pretty similar. Being a Canadian is basically just having this air of superiority over America. Like anything that's happening here that's bad, you're just like,
well, at least it's not as bad as the States.
You know, is that the best way to look at things? Probably not.
I wonder, do you think the acronym was meant to be cheesy? Like, did they start with the acronym and they're like, ooh, how can we make it
As bad as the standard American diet is, it's kind of like taking over the world with globalization. A lot of developing countries are now adopting this diet and seeing, instead of having undernutrition, they're having like overnutrition and seeing a lot of these chronic diseases that are associated with the standard American diets.
What is the standard American diet? Sometimes it's referred to as the Western diet. Essentially, it's referring to this dietary pattern where we're getting maybe an excess of calories from packaged foods, processed foods, refined carbohydrates, fatty meats, processed meats, and maybe even like sugar-sweetened beverages, while simultaneously being lower in whole grains, fruits, and vegetables.
And this is probably not a shock to really anyone, but this diet has largely been tied to a lot of these chronic diseases that we're seeing. Things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer. People are really tying it back to this standard American diet.
I think the biggest thing that we're seeing in recent decades is the fact that this type of dietary pattern is contributing quite a bit of excess calories. Different studies have different numbers, but it does seem like generally the consensus is that calorie intake has gone up in recent decades, anywhere from 300 to 700 extra calories per day.
And you couple that with the fact that we're just a lot more sedentary than we used to be, that can have significant impacts on things like obesity. When we see this change in caloric consumption, we see this attributed to certain foods. And really the big players here are things like refined grains and added fats and sugars.
What's perhaps surprising is that, believe it or not, in the last couple of decades, diet quality has actually improved a little bit. Still not great, but it has improved, although this improvement is not uniform across the board. Perhaps unsurprisingly, we do find that higher income households, diet quality has improved a little bit over the last couple of decades, whereas we don't see any change amongst lower income households.
People have become a lot more health focused, especially when it comes to diet over like the 2000s, and this might be confirmation bias because I was only alive during that time, but you know, even the fact that like juice is unhealthy. I remember like my mom stopped buying juice because it was like no longer seen as like a fruit serving. It's kind of like, oh, it's like this added sugar stuff. And I think, you know, people are paying more attention to these things. So I'm not surprised that over the past 2 decades or so, we're seeing some slight improvements. Despite these slight improvements for some people, the US population is not doing too hot when it comes to diet. There is something called the Healthy Eating Index score, and this is basically how well people stick to the dietary guidance. So this is like the US food guidelines, and I think the average is kind of a 58, and this is out of 100. So really this is saying that people are not doing well.
What is that, a D+? So when we talk about diet quality being poor, a huge part of that comes from the intake of ultra-processed foods. Ultra-processed foods, what that means is these foods that are made entirely or mostly from compounds that are synthesized in the lab or compounds that are extracted from foods. Somewhere between 35 to 65% of people's calorie intake is coming from these types of foods. And you know, different studies have different numbers. Generally, we feel like over 50% of most people's calorie intakes is coming from these types of foods. If I were to make like a sweeping generalization, they tend to be calorically dense while not offering a lot of valuable micronutrients.
And you know, you often hear people be like,
Oh, don't eat it if you can't pronounce what's on the label.
generally ultra-processed foods have these things that you can't pronounce on the label. It is a very broad category. To say everything that's ultra processed is bad for you is an oversimplification. Generally, they are associated with poorer health outcomes. We have actually seen a slight increase in the consumption of ultra processed foods. About 4% more of our daily energy is coming from ultra processed foods. To me, it's not really that surprising because I think we're becoming more and more like on the go kind of people. So the things that you have on the go tend to be ultra processed food.
Things like canned soups, frozen dinners, frozen pizzas, even burgers, confectionery items, pies, candy, chocolate, ultra processed meats.
There has been certain foods that have been kind of like really vilified over the past, I don't know, you're older than me. How long has it
I
been?
don't know. I feel like in the last 10 years especially, like how people view things like sugar sweetened beverages and bread products has changed a lot.
And that shows in consumption. So we've seen decreases in soda consumption, sweet drink consumption in general, breakfast cereals, bread, and ice cream.
Ice cream surprises me.
Yeah.
The bread and breakfast cereals, I think carbs in general have like a really bad reputation. Again, that's persisted for a little while now. I feel like there might have been a lot of public health campaigning or messaging around decreasing pop intake, and it seems to have been quite effective. Despite that particular change, we still find that about 15% of people's calorie intake is coming from beverages in general.
Oh, it's a lot.
That is a lot. Not surprising though, because especially I think with like things like Starbucks and all like the fancy drinks and stuff, like some of those beverages are like hundreds of calories, and people are having 1 or 2 a day.
I don't know. I don't really like Starbucks.
Yeah, Starbucks is really horrible.
Okay, I don't drink coffee at all, but I just don't like their other drinks. And like,
no, their coffee's always burnt. It always tastes burnt.
That's what my mom says.
No, it's true. I think Starbucks was succeeded because of their vibe.
The good vibes.
It was all vibe. So 15% of calories is coming from beverages as a whole, and 4% is coming from sugar sweetened beverages. So these are things like pop and sports drinks and energy drinks. They don't include things like the coffee drinks and stuff that we talked about.
So I think you're right. The rest of that like 10% must be coming from those like coffee drinks. In the American diet, it seems as though a lot of energy is coming from drinks. You know where a lot of energy is not coming from? Fruits and vegetables. That's because only 10% of Americans are meeting the fruits and vegetable recommendation. The recommendation is 1.5 to 2 cups of fruit and 2 to 3 cups of vegetables per day.
And it seems like on any given day, maybe a third of people in the US are not eating any fruit at all. But luckily, on any given day, only 5% of people are not eating any fruit or vegetable. Although now that I say that, 5% is still a lot of people.
Yeah.
This is probably going to be the hardest thing for me. And it's so funny because like in the last, when we did the vegan thing, I was saying how like, I'm so glad that I haven't had to like give up fruit in any of my diets. And I know I don't have to give it up completely, but like, I think this is going to be the hardest one for me, which is 30% of calories coming from restaurants. That's a lot. I actually didn't even realize this about myself until I was like preparing myself mentally for this video. In my mind, like restaurant meals are like for like socializing or for celebration. I just don't just like have restaurant meals just like during the week of like by myself. It's just not something that I do.
Would you count like a Tim Hortons? Like what about a Timmy's?
But I don't even do that. Like, so if I'm traveling and I have no choice, that's one thing, obviously. But like when I'm home, but it's funny because like a lot of times, like randomly, like Rory will be like, "Oh, let's go get pizza today" or whatever, and I'm usually like, "But we have food at home. Like, why are we gonna go?"
You're the mom. It's like we have food at home.
But like, why are we gonna go spend like what's inevitably going to be at least $50 on some meal, like when we already have food at home?
That's
it's just, so basically my bank account's going to take a hit, but my husband's going to be happier.
Yay.
So
go Rory. I'm happy for Rory. To be fair, this is restaurants that are also like fast food. So getting like a Starbucks, getting a Tim's, getting a McDonald's, getting a...
I think I'm of the mindset, like, if I'm going to go to a restaurant,
you want it to be actually good.
I want it to be good.
That's fair.
I think this is going to be good because I do spend a decent amount of waking energy and time, like thinking about what am I going to eat over the next few days, and like when am I going to get groceries, when I'm going to make the food, blah, blah, blah. I feel like for the next 10 days, I can just not do that. Turns out that snack foods contribute about 23% of people's energy intake.
I'm not surprised by this at all. And this is my conspiracy theories. I think that like the food companies are trying to sell more food because I think there's been an increase in the amount of snacks.
I don't think that's a conspiracy. I think that's like a fact.
Oh,
is that not an accepted fact? Because I feel like you hear from like back in the day, well, people just had 3 meals, but now it's like we're like marketed to like, oh yeah, now it's time for my 3 p.m. snack. This is my morning snack. This is my post-dinner snack.
And I just feel like there's new snacks all the time, and this like
and it's like part of our culture now. So we kind of alluded to this in the beginning already. No surprise to anyone, the standard American diet, not exactly known for being the most healthful. I think across the world, sometimes I think the American diet gets shamed a little bit. And even like the quality of food, I think it's maybe more like focused on quantity more so than quality.
Okay, I will say that is a real thing though, because have you been to the United States and gotten a portion? It's freaking huge.
Tell the people about the bucket of cookies.
Okay, I went to what's this team called?
Jays?
The Blue Jays versus the Anaheim Angels game, and they were selling cookies by the bucket. And like this bucket was like this big and like this tall. It had so many cookies in it, and people were buying full buckets for their kids. And I'm like, wow, I'm in America. I felt like I was really like part of the culture. Like, you know, if when you go to France and you see the Eiffel Tower, you eat a loaf of like baguette.
Exactly.
I saw that bucket of cookies. I was like, wow, this
You're
is
really
America.
embracing the culture.
Yeah.
Even like, I don't know, you hear all the time, like when people go to like Europe or something, they're like, this is the best tomato I've ever had in my entire life. Like even from like a produce standpoint, I don't know, I feel that. Like the best orange I've ever had was in Portugal. Oh, people from like Britain and stuff, like when they come here, apparently the chocolate in the US, like, I don't know if it's North America as a whole, but apparently the chocolate here sucks.
Honestly, I think the British and their chocolate is just like, because when I was in Australia, they said the same thing, and here it says, but I've heard it's because...
But everyone thinks here sucks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
but I've heard it's because like the melting. This is not important, but the melting point, and then it gets hotter here. The Britain's just cold and miserable all the time, so they can put different amounts of cocoa, butter. That's what I've heard. I don't know if that's true. Anyway.
Okay. As he said, a lot of these foods, they are contributing excess calories. As you can imagine, the standard American diet does seem to be associated with increased risk for obesity.
Obesity comes along with a lot of things. Obesity can increase the risk of cardiovascular disease, certain cancers, diabetes. Obviously not the only factor, but definitely an important one. Obesity can lead to increased risk of things like diabetes, but it actually seems as though the standard American diet in and of itself can increase the risk of diabetes. It shows that perhaps it's not just the excess calories, there is something else about the diet that can put you at increased risk of poor health outcomes.
When you think about like words like malnutrition or malnourished, I think we like imagine like,
starving kids in Africa.
but like really we find that a lot of overweight and obese people are also actually malnourished from a micronutrient standpoint, because a lot of these types of foods from, you know, when you're talking about things like potassium and calcium and iron and other micronutrients that our bodies need, these foods tend to be low in them. So all that being said, for some reason, we're going to be doing this
for 10 days.
For 10 days.
2 dietitians do the standard American diet for 10 days. Follow along.
I feel like I'm going to have to fight all my like natural tendencies. Maybe not natural. No, not natural, because I think a lot of the standard American diet is exploiting our natural tendencies.
And we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that.
But my current tendencies, I'm going to have to fight a lot of them.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to change some of my current habits. I don't think it's going to be like super hard. I think it might be kind of fun.
I think it'll be fun. I'm going to make it fun.
You're going to make it fun? Okay.
I don't know what I mean by that. So what is this going to look like? About 30% of our calories from restaurants. We're going to try to not meet our fruit and vegetable recommendations. 15% of calories from beverages.
And we're going to up those ultra-processed foods. I can't wait.
Can't wait.
10 days.
I will say, I know that like food quality really affects my mood and like my energy levels. So
got something to vlog.
Huh?
Something to vlog.
I know, so we'll see.
So yeah, guys, make sure you subscribe so you can follow us along on this journey. We're going to be touching on a lot of different aspects of this diet, from the nutritional standpoint to kind of what all those sneaky food scientists are doing to keep us addicted and eating more of these foods, to how they've integrated it into our lifestyles, why we can't, rid ourselves of them even though we know they're kind of bad for us. And then also, what can we do as individuals and as a society to, improve the sad, make it a little less sad, more happy.
Well, we'll come up with an acronym.
I don't know. Anyway, we'll come up with something. We probably won't, but
I'm sure I'll forget about it. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a video, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok.
Thanks for watching. Bye.